What are the best base locations in Dune Awakening? You are kinda spoiled for choice, so where are the ideal places to lay down some roots? Today we'll be looking at all of the best base locations from the early game to the end game, with some useful tips included too. Let's get started. The best base locations in the early game are quite simple. When you're in Hugger Basin South, try not to worry too much about it. As long as you're in this general area, you've got easy access to the Trial Cave, the Eco Lab and the Trade Post, the three most important things you'll need before you head north. You want to get out of Hugger Basin South as soon as possible. There's no point sticking around after you've made a vehicle, so anywhere here should work fine. When you hit the Vermilius Gap, you've got two major options. The first is near the Anvil Trade Post, and the second at the Mirzabar. The latter has good options for general traversal around the gap, and will be easier for getting some select resources and travelling into the Western Gap later on, but I think the Anvil Trade Post wins out here. It's not too far from the Mirzabar anyway, only adding maybe a minute or so onto your trips west, but you are much closer to not only an NPC vendor and a source of contracts, but also to faction reps, the Rift and Jabal of Freet, where you can start to farm Erathite and Carbon to move into the Steel tier. The Anvil is already a pretty popular location, and for good reason. It's likely the best for this stage of the game. When you reach the mid-game, your needs are going to change rapidly. Thus, I believe there are two ideal spots. The first is the northern and western edges of the Western Vermilius Gap, right in the middle of the map. This makes getting almost everywhere much easier, as you're of course in a central location, and thus moving around and farming becomes a lot more flexible, especially when you need to go north into the depths of the shield wall to get aluminium. The second option is somewhere in this zone just north. This makes farming aluminium a bit easier overall while still remaining fairly central. If you don't set yourself up correctly, and I'm talking from experience, that transition from the steel tier will end up being a miserable grind. Moving into the late game, you've got a few options for base locations. The first is to simply stay in or around the northwestern Vermilius Gap. Aluminium is still required into the late game, and this spot retains its great ability to move around the map at ease. It is a really good location, even as your needs change into the late game. Another solid option is Mesa Toril and the Northern Sheol. Both Mesa and the Udum have good sources of loot, resources and valuable aluminium and basalt, alongside agave seeds in the Udum that you will need for jasmium farming. When you do need to cut up some crystal, it's a straight shot south to the Sheol via Buggy or Thopter, making farming mass amounts of duraluminium a lot smoother. Lastly, a good option is anywhere close to the world border in these marked areas. If you don't already know, you can use your ornithopter to fly to the edge of the map and fast travel through the overland map, letting you quickly cover thousands of kilometres to farm jasmium, aluminium and more. The only downside is that buggy farming the Sheol isn't as smooth with this method. You either need a farming base or you need to take the trip overland with the buggy, so it won't be for everyone. Generally, for the late game, I would recommend either sticking in Western Vermilius or moving over to Mesa Toril. Lastly, when it comes to the end game, especially in the context of the deep desert, the edges of the map become a lot more attractive. Western Verm is still okay, but it's preferable to be closer to the world border to get out of Hugger Basin and travel to the deep desert and the social hubs. Aluminium and duraluminium are still required at the end game too, so near the world border anywhere in the west is especially perfect for any regular attendee of the deep desert that needs smooth paths of traversal to and from Hugger, especially for hauling loot and materials. So, in summary, let's go over the best spots again. Early game, anywhere in this zone in Hugger Basin South, and around the Anvil Trade Post in Eastern Vermilius. For the mid game, the north section of Western Vermilius, or just north on the border of Jabal of Freet. Late game, either stick with West Vermilius or somewhere on the southern border of Mesa Toril or the northern end of the Sheol. For the endgame, pretty much anywhere on the western side of the map near the world border will make traversal, farming and logistics much easier. It goes without saying, these are just my takes on the matter. I think everyone will end up having a slightly different view on the best spots at each stage of the game. Hugger Basin isn't really that big once you get a decent ornithopter, so late in endgame, almost anything can work. I live in the Eastern Rift, a place I haven't really mentioned here, and yet I get on pretty fine. Almost anywhere can work, some spots just make life much easier. Anyway, that will wrap us up for today with the best places to build your base in Dune Awakening. If you enjoy my content, check out my Patreon where you can get videos early amongst other perks. At the time of recording I have about 10 to 12 videos on Patreon that aren't out on YouTube yet. There's always more content coming, and of course joining us on Patreon helps me and the channel out massively, link in the description. On that note, a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultist for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Take care, and I'll see you soon.